So today I'd like to take you back to 2020. In a very strange time during the pandemic where I was allowed to work but not do much else, my life consisted of waking up, going to work, coming home to spend the evening playing video games, and repeat.
Then one day I started playing a game called Ghost of Tsushima, an open world game set in feudal Japan, a time period I've always been fascinated with. I was blown away by this game's incredible visuals, and I found myself wanting to capture its stunning landscapes. And so one day I opened up Ghost of Tsushima's photo mode. I was amazed with how much detail was in this game's photo mode, allowing you to change the focal length, depth of field, focus distance, and even colour grade your shots, even allowing you to change the game's world within the photo mode, by changing the wind direction, weather, time of day, and even the emotions on the face of the game's protagonist, Jin. After a few days of playing with the game's photo mode, the thought started to creep in. Maybe it's time to buy a camera, go outside, and do this in the real world. 1 week later, I was awaiting the arrival of my first mirrorless camera, the Sony a6100.
So after almost 4 years as a photographer, I felt it was time to revisit some of these video game photo modes and explore them from a photographer's perspective. So I'm going to look at how accurate they are compared to using a real camera, discuss how these photo modes can be used as a learning or a practicing tool for photographers, and hopefully inspire you either as a photographer to give these photo modes a try, or as a gamer to maybe go and pick up a camera and give photography a try yourself. Before I do get started, I just want to put it out there that I'm aware that some of the points I'll make in this video will be divisive amongst either photographers or gamers. I mean, for me, this is the hobby equivalent of mixing those two friend groups that have completely different personalities. However, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and if you want to make that known, feel free to in the comments. I also just want to start by saying that while I believe that there is value in using video game photo modes as a learning or practicing tool, I do believe that a lot more skill is involved in using a real camera. For example, a landscape photographer who has waited hours for the shot they're looking for to get the best light and has spent years learning techniques to get that shot correct does take more skill than pressing buttons on a controller. However, that does not take away from what video game photography might mean to somebody else. Remember, art is subjective. It means something to somebody. My point being, just be nice. So with revisiting photo modes, I chose 3 games that I wanted to explore, with a reason behind each of them. The first being Forza Horizon 4.
My reason behind choosing Forza Horizon 4 was that it covers 2 types of photography, in motorsport and landscape. It's also just a visually beautiful game that I still occasionally revisit. I chose Forza Horizon 4 rather than Forza Horizon 5, specifically due to it being set in the Lake District, where I visited a lot throughout my life, and parts of Scotland, including my favourite city in the UK, Edinburgh. So this just felt like the right choice, as it's much closer to home than Forza Horizon 5's Mexico. And before I get started, I just want to say I will not be answering any questions about the license plate in some of these photos at this time. Upon first opening the game's photo mode, I was pretty impressed with how many options are available, and how much you can control within your photos. As with real life motorsport photography, shutter speed is very important here, and you can create a shot with absolutely no motion with it set to 0, or the complete opposite at 100 if you want to get that Max Verstappen driving the car look. The scale was a little confusing at first, with it being the opposite of how shutter speed works on cameras, but I think this is a great tool for any non-photographers looking to learn how shutter speed affects the level of motion blur within a photo. You can also change the level of focus and the aperture to determine the level of background blur, and you can even change the bokeh shape to circle, diamond, pentagon, or hexagon. Of course, there are also options to change the exposure, contrast, colour, vibrance, brightness, sepia level, and vignette. These last few options I didn't really play around with too much, instead choosing to look for in-game areas that were nicely lit, which I would recommend doing for anyone using the game to practice photography or learn photography, as it would help get used to the process as a photographer of waiting for that perfect light, and usually being disappointed when you end up with overcast skies instead. There are also some useful presets if you want to colour grade your shots, including soft, high and low contrast, monochrome and vintage. It's also worth noting that for any interior shots, unless you're driving a convertible, the photo mode doesn't let you inside the car. That's where Forza Vista comes in, allowing you to photograph the meticulously crafted interiors of the hundreds of cars on offer. One small disappointment that's more related to the game than its photo mode is that due to its live service nature, a new season starts within the game every Thursday, and so when I booted the game up, eager to take some golden autumnal or icy winter photos, the current season was actually summer, so I had to wait a whole week for autumn and then a whole week for winter. Still, it was well worth the wait and beats waiting months in real time to be able to go outside and shoot in these conditions. I actually found the process of driving and looking for in-game locations to photograph got pretty addictive. Whether it was action shots of my car speeding through a country lane, parked overlooking a beautiful landscape, or even just landscape shots without any cars in shot. Where I started out just by using the cars available to me from my previous time playing the game, I soon started buying cars just to photograph them. The classic Aston Martin DB5 fitting in perfectly with the British countryside, a Honda Civic on the streets of Edinburgh, or my personal dream car, the Lamborghini Countach, which looks incredible in any situation. These cars were all purchased with an idea of a photo in mind, which brings me back to how this game is a great tool for photographers in terms of allowing you to visualize a shot. One small improvement I would make to Forza's photo mode would be for some of the settings to match that of a real camera. For example, if the aperture scale was f-stops rather than just a 0 to 100 scale, and the same goes for the shutter speed, which would really help with any photographers using the photo mode, or for anyone using the photo mode as a learning tool. I was impressed with just how much Forza encourages you to use its photo mode, and even reward you for it through photography challenges and a checklist for each car photographed. It's also full of these beauty spots, such as Bamborough Castle, Alpha's Seat, and Glenfinnan Viaduct, which I was really excited to find as I visited there last year and managed to get a shot from the exact angle I took my shots from. Just remember not to drive down the tracks at the exact moment the Flying Scotsman is passing through like I did. There's a lot to get out of this game's photo mode, and whether you're a motorsport enthusiast or even a photographer, I definitely recommend giving it a try.
Next up was Cyberpunk 2077, which I chose for a couple of reasons. The first being my love for street photography and the art style of this game matching the look that I generally go for in my nighttime street photography.
With the game mainly being set in a bustling futuristic city covered in neon, this game is ideal to try and match the type of nighttime street shots I usually take. I mean, one of the presets I use the most is even called Cyberpunk. The second reason being I had played around with the photo mode on this game a little bit when it first came out, but not extensively. I even managed to find a few of the photos I took back then, which got me excited to get back into this game's photo mode. Now we will start off by saying that Cyberpunk's photo mode feels quite clunky and rigid in comparison to the other photo modes I use for this video. To start with, the photo mode has two camera options, which are first person or drone. The first person photo mode shows exactly what you're looking at in the game, however this is basically locked into where your character is stood, meaning if you want to readjust your framing, you have to exit out of photo mode and then re-enter. The drone mode is locked onto your character from a third person view, where you can then rotate around your character. There are a few nice presets for this, and you can remove your character entirely from a shot using the pose options. I mostly opted to use the first person view as I preferred being able to walk around to get my framing correct. There is the option to turn depth of field on or off here, within which you can then turn autofocus on or off and change the aperture. The scale for which is more similar to a real camera here, starting at 1.2 and scaling up to 16. The pose options allow you to change the pose of your character, including their facial expression. This wasn't a feature I used too much, as I took more of an approach with this game that my character was the photographer rather than the model. You can customize the look of your photo by changing the exposure, contrast, highlights, vignette, chromatic aberration, or grain. Similar to Forza, there are presets for color grading. These are just numbered rather than named, which makes it a little harder to figure out what the effect is supposed to be. Most of them are pretty cool, apart from a few of them which are just blown out colors, which I'm not really a big fan of. Finally, there is the option to add different stickers to your shot, which may appeal to some people, but isn't really for me. Despite the photo mode in Cyberpunk being quite basic and clunky, the in-game world more than makes up for it. The incredibly lit neon streets of Night City are absolutely perfect for finding moments worth capturing, and I spent a fair bit of time just wandering around on foot scanning for shots, almost in the same way I do with my real life street photography. even at times waiting for an NPC or vehicle to pass through a composition I'd found. One positive of Cyberpunk from a photography perspective is the ability to forward time. As much as the game's world looks incredible in the day, it really comes alive at night. I mean, it is set in Night City after all. At night, the city's neon glow really stands out, and it feels like there's something to photograph down every street. I found myself looking for puddles on the ground the way I would in real life, to capture reflections of buildings. This is a great example of how these photo modes can be used to practice photography techniques and experiment with compositions. Overall, Cyberpunk's photo mode was the one I used the least, due to it being more basic and clunky to use. You can still capture some incredible images using it though, and revisiting this game to use its photo mode has made me more than ready for a second playthrough.
And finally, of course, I just had to revisit Ghost of Tsushima.
So to start with on this one, I just want to say that I'd forgotten just how much this game's photo mode allows you to customize your shots. Whereas in Forza you're locked into the current season, weather conditions and time of day, and in Cyberpunk you can change the time of day but not the weather, Ghost of Tsushima gives you full control over all of this. So as long as you've found the location and composition for your photo, you're then free to change the time of day, weather conditions, and even the cloud position. Then on top of that, you can add particles such as cherry blossoms, different coloured leaves, insects, or birds, and then choose the amount of these particles appearing on screen, and the wind direction to control which way the particles are moving. The photo mode also includes the usual options such as focal length, focus distance, exposure, and depth of field, which actually uses f-stops as its scale here, similar to Cyberpunk, making it a great learning tool for anyone just starting out with photography. The colour grading options in Ghost of Tsushima's photo mode are pretty nice, however I never felt much need to use them when the game naturally is so vibrant and beautifully lit. Instead, I preferred using the time of day and weather sliders to experiment with different looks. You can also customize Jin's look in photos with options for his emotions, a clean, muddy or bloody look, and whether or not his helmet and mask are visible in the shot. It is a shame there are no options for different character poses like in Cyberpunk. Instead, you need to change to photo mode at the right moment in an animation you want to capture. It's incredible just how many options this photo mode gives you to get creative. You can even create images that are straight out of an Akira Kurosawa movie using the game's Kurosawa mode, and then adding cinema bars to your photo. Ghost of Tsushima is one of the few games where just existing within the game's world is enjoyable. Stopping to take in the environment around you feels like part of the gameplay cycle, and each new area you come across feels fresh and exciting. From the vibrant golden forest early in the game, to the snow-covered Mount Jugaku late in the game, the diverse environments are full of moments worth capturing. Whether you're in the midst of an intense battle, riding on horseback, or just stopping to take in your surroundings, there's always a composition worth shooting. In my time revisiting Ghost of Tsushima, it was easy to see why the game inspired me to jump into its photo mode, and how the depth of its photo mode inspired me to pick up a camera.
Thank you so much for joining me on this journey exploring video game photo modes. As I said at the start, I hope I've inspired you either as a photographer to try out some of these photo modes, or as a gamer to pick up a camera and go and try photography. Please let me know as well if there's any other photo modes that you've personally played that you think I should give a try. And if you did enjoy this video, please let me know, because I've got some other ideas that are kind of similar to this one. I did really enjoy making this video, so I'd love to do more like it. Don't forget to subscribe, give this video a like if you did enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next one.